Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Osceola's Reeling Them In Recruiting Report. I am joined as always by the Osceola legend, Charles Fishbein. Fish is coming to us from South Florida. He's got a fancy new virtual background behind him. One of our sponsors, Alumni Hall, so they'll be happy that you chose their background. And, of course, for bringing in our third man on the team, Nick Carlisle, who spent the weekend and most of this week following up from his coverage of spring showcase visitors. So we've got a lot to talk about, a little bit of the NFL draft, a little bit of recruiting, a little bit of spring football. We had recruiting going on in Tallahassee, and then I was up in Atlanta working the Rivals Elite Camp on Sunday. Over 200 of the best players in the Southeast, actually 9 different states represented. And, of course, we do want to take time to thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Aer Lingus. Aer Lingus is the title sponsor of the game in Dublin that Florida State is playing in against Georgia Tech on August 24th in Dublin, Ireland. And if you want to check out tickets packages with Aer Lingus, both plane and football tickets, Seminoles2Ireland.com. Go to Seminoles, the number 2, Ireland.com. And then next week we'll be introducing another new sponsor for the Osceola, and it will be a name that's familiar to Florida State fans back in the 80s and 90s. But anyway, a lot going on, guys. And last night, of course, a lot of excitement in Tallahassee and around the football program this weekend because of the NFL draft. And as I spoke about with J.P. Peterson on his show in Tampa yesterday, it's been a long time since we had a reason to watch all 3 days of the draft. And, of course, Jared Verse goes 18th, and I want to thank the L.A. Rams for that because I predicted on JP's show yesterday that he'd go somewhere between 10 and 20, and there were all kinds of rumors that he was falling back, but luckily only fell back to 18th, which is pretty good. But anyway, so what you guys think about Jared going to 18th, Fish? You thought that too high, too low, about right?
No, I was kind of surprised that Kuiper bashed him as much as he did. I don't see Jared as a stiff, like he made him seem like a stiff defensive end that can't move laterally. I actually thought the draft went pretty how it should have gone. There weren't a lot of surprises. Yes, Penix went to the Falcons.
That thought it was no sense, by the way. That's a weird draft pick.
Yeah, but if you look at quarterbacks now that go in the first round don't cost really these NFL teams anything. So you're basically getting them on.
Why not go get Kirk Cousins at Dunze or somebody like that?
They obviously liked Penix, and maybe there's something about Cousins we don't know. Maybe he's not recovering from his injury as well as they thought he would at this point. Who knows?
He might be spending way too much time at Magic City. You're right. Who knows what's going on? But Nick, what do you think about Verse going 18th? And listen, I'm happy for Rams. Are a good program. They got a good quarterback. They needed a defensive player to kind of offset the loss of Aaron Donald. Actually, I was hoping Fisk might go to the Rams to replace Aaron Donald because they're similar as far as stature. But anyway, what do you think?
There's no replacing Aaron Donald, right? That's right. One of the best defensive players of all time. But you got a pretty good one there in Jared Verse, and I was happy to see that's about where I saw Verse landing in this draft. I think it's a good spot for him. They've got a winning culture. They're definitely not afraid to take chances to get over the hump, and especially a tough division. And they got a great head coach. I guess he's not so young and inventive anymore, but McVay's a great coach, and I think it's a really good landing spot for him. They seem excited to have him, and that defense is going to continue to be really, really good.
Yeah, and of course they've got Brian Zanders, a former Florida State walk-on linebacker. He's an executive with the Rams. So, in fact, Brian was in town not too long ago. So, good for Jared. Congratulations to him and his family. Obviously, I can remember when we were trying to tell people his first year here that he was not going to be Jermaine Johnson, and he turned out to be. He was as dominant as Jermaine. There's no doubt about that. Just a little bit different player, and I think that was probably what your guy Kuiper was alluding to, Fish. Like, he's not bendy like Miles Garrett, whatever his name is up there in Cleveland. That's huge, but is really bendy and can do all that. He was
also the first pick in the draft. Nobody thought Jared was ever going that high. Listen, when we first started talking about him, I thought that he needed 1 year of getting adjusted to the Division I level, and that we would see that next level this year. And we did see the Florida game. I think it was a Louisville game. Those two games back to back.
18 total pressures in those two games.
He pretty much controlled and dominated as well as Fisk. To me, Florida State, this should be a great selling point for future defensive ends. We've already seen you're going to talk about it with what Marvin Jones did in the spring. They've done a very good job of that so-called word developing, that key word. They should be able to parlay that into some pretty darn good players.
And I'll give them their props for helping develop Verse beyond what he was when he got here.
Yeah.
Braden Fisk, that was a man on a mission. Listen, his profile was certainly raised because he came to Florida State. But I give him more credit for developing Verse. But listen, Nick and I talked to some prospects on one of the last unofficial visit weekends, and they do talk about the fact that Florida State's been able to develop you hear the defensive ends talk about it. We heard Jarquez Carter and Myron Charles both talk about the fact that their conversation was Fisk about he could have gone somewhere for more money. He mentioned USC specifically, but he chose Florida State because of their ability to develop defensive linemen across the board, whether it's end or tackles, and that he took less money to make more money on the back end rate. He invested in it himself. So now, speaking of that, who you think's next off the board? Is it Keon? Is it Braden? Is it Trey? I think it's going to probably be Keon or Braden, but which one do you guys think comes off the board next?
The Bills need a receiver, and I think Keon's the best available. Or one of the top guys left.
Yeah, I would say Keon as well, especially because Pearsall and Leggett went 31 and 32 right at the end. So a couple of wide receivers are already off the board. If those guys didn't get taken, maybe you could see somebody like Braden or Trey sneaking past Keon like somewhere in the middle of the second round based on need. But since those two wide receivers went at the end of round one, I think we'll probably see Keon come off the board. And I think Buffalo's a good landing spot. And there's definitely some more teams in the second round that could use a receiver.
And he's played in the cold before.
That's true.
So.
Yeah. Well, listen, he is. I think he's one of the top receivers. I know he's getting dinged a little bit because of that 4.63 40 that he ran at the combine, but he offset that with the fastest time in the gauntlet drill, which is an actual football drill with a football, and a clear objective of what you're supposed to get done. So anyway, listen, I think it's going to be Braden will be the next guy drafted, but I think Keon's going to go shortly. I think we're going to see these guys go within I'm going to say 6 to 10 spots of each other. I think and then I think Trey will be a third round guy. And then of course, I think we'll see, Renardo could be a third round guy. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the first 4 rounds for sure. So anyway, exciting time to be around Florida State football from a draft aspect. We talked about this a little before we had our technical issue. It's been a long time since we've been able to be excited about all 3 days of the draft with Florida State. And, a lot of that credit goes to Mike Norvell and what he's done to turn this roster over and bring some talent in, either through the high school ranks or the portal ranks. And, of course, listen, they had a lot of guys on campus this past weekend for the spring showcase, Nick. We got the latest news, breaking news really, is the commitment of Jalen Waters, the 2026 quarterback out of Tampa, four-star guy right now by Rivals. Fish, what are your thoughts on him as a player? I don't know if you've had time to watch his film, but
I did an eval on him a while ago. I mean, he's going to be one of the top players in that class. Big, long, athletic kid. We talked about this. They've changed the way they look at corners. I think a lot of that has to go to Randy because Randy likes big, long, athletic defensive backs. You see them staying away from the 5'9", 5'10" guys and going to more guys that look like this. I guess there's no Armwood curse anymore. I think we could get over that whole Armwood curse that Florida State can't get players out of there. The program did not like Florida State for a while for whatever reason, but I think
probably old Sean Callahan.
Yeah, he's gone.
Thank God.
Yeah, and so are some of his buddies, but
Brady.
They're gone, and they can move on, and he's going to be one of the top defensive backs in the 26 class. So.
Yeah, I was super impressed with this film. I didn't watch this film until he committed, and I was watching it the other day. I wish there was more film. Very limited huddle tape. I'm sure you got actual game tape that you've watched. But Nick, what was kind of, obviously he committed after his visit, but what was kind of, I know you interviewed him. What was kind of his what did he like about Florida State? What did he tell you about the visit? And was there any indication that this was going to come as quickly as it did?
Well, I can't say that I thought this commit was gonna come as quickly as it did, because obviously we're in 2025 season and Florida State can only nail 2026 kids right now. So I thought surely we're gonna start to get some 2025 news, but no. I mean, he came out of his visit all giddy and smiley, and he's a very short-worded kid. I mean, he didn't say too much other than the fact that he thinks, look, Florida State is a defensive back school, and while maybe they haven't been so much of that recently, they definitely have been able to develop some good defensive backs here as of late. And he feels like Florida State is a place that he can really be developed, and I think that he's going to be one of the best defensive backs in the cycle next year. Obviously, he feels like he can be developed, and he is perfect for the type of player, to Fish's point, that both Randy Shannon and Pat Surtain back in the defensive end. So I can't, like I said, I can't say that I felt like this decision was going to come so soon, but you definitely came out of his visit that knowing that he really liked this school. And I mean, he dropped Florida State in his top 5 before he even really visited for the showcase. And I can't remember if he had visited Florida State prior to that point, but I guess now the question is, can Florida State hold on to him for what month is it? April of 2025 or 2024? So
the good news is he can't enter the portal.
Yeah, no kidding. So there's a long way to go, but I mean, he's obviously pretty happy about his decision right now. We'll see as he goes further on in his process.
Yeah.
Whether it stays like
What's
that.
crazy is it's because he's the most recent commit. It seems like the 2026 class has more momentum than the 2025, which is weird. But of course, I think we also know that the portal, to some extent, the spring transfer window is going to affect the roster. We've only had 2 players leave. Fish, I will ask both of you about that. Are you surprised we have not? I mean, and when I say 2 players leave, I'm talking about scholarship guys that would have had a chance to compete for a role in the 2 deep. You had Greedy Vance leave, who was actually a starter, would have been a starter had he stayed, regardless of what you're being told by whatever service you're reading. He did not get beat out by Earl Little. That's somebody carrying the water for the program. Earl Little has played 21 snaps of football for Alabama, and why he is a potentially really legitimately good football player. He is potential versus proven. So I think that was I was hoping they'd be able to talk Greedy coming back, but he's going to USC. And then you lost Vantrevious Jacobs, a guy that has all the talent in the world, was probably not catching on like he needed to. I think that was one where it was probably good for both parties to move on. That's just me reading the tea leaves. But Fish, what are your thoughts? And do you think we'll see more attrition? Because we do know that they have interest in 2 defensive tackles at Michigan State, and we'll get in that when you give us your take on the 2 kids that left the program.
I think one that you've seen that they've been very slow to react, because I still think they have to get under a certain number. Yeah. I don't know what their roster number is at now. I think it was like 87, I thought I saw. So they still have to get to 85. They have to lose. They have some issues with probation or whatever, where they have to lose 5 scholarships over the next 2 years. Do they take all 5 this year? So I think that's why they've kind of been slow to get rid of guys and also add guys. Plus, the word I've heard from certain contexts I've spoken to is that this cycle, most of the kids that have entered the portal are more backups. There aren't a lot of high quality end kids, and you've seen less turnover this cycle compared to the first cycle. So I think Florida State's taking their time. They don't have a whole bunch of needs. I think you could maybe add one more wide receiver, possibly a tight end, and some interior D linemen, maybe one more linebacker. But they don't really have a ton of needs as far as moving forward this year. And I'm sure at some point they want to trust the kids they've brought in and give them a shot if they can't really improve that room through the portal.
Yeah. Nick, what's your take on what do you think they're going to do with the portal? I tend to agree with Fish. I think it's going to be a limited number. Mike does most of his portal work heavy in the winter.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit surprised that more people haven't moved on because, I mean, just you and I have both been to practice. These practices are competitive. There is a lot of competition up and down the roster. I'm a little bit surprised that Florida State hasn't lost more to the portal, not like an exorbitant amount, but maybe like 2 or 3 more guys than we've already seen. I can't really see them judging by, and of course, going into like, this is going to be the craziest spring window ever. And it's turned out to be a snooze across the board for everybody. But I really can't see them taking too much more. Obviously, Cam Riley just decommitted from his commitment to NC State. So I think if Florida State's going to kick the tires on anybody, they're probably going to go back to him. And if they are not satisfied with what they saw from in the spring from their linebackers, they might and try and grab him and go after him. But I can't really see them going after anybody unless there's more attrition, maybe in the wide receiver room or offensive tackle or guard goes into the portal somewhere. So if they're going to slow play it, that's fine. I'm a little surprised that more haven't left, but I mean, maybe that's a good sign. Maybe, this team is, sticking to it, for lack of a better term, throughout the summer. And then we'll see, kind of just where things line up in the fall.
Yeah, I think they're taking a look at a couple of tackles. I've heard they're taking a look at the tackle at Miami. They're kicking the tires on that. And he's got a long name, Fish. I'm sure you know what it is. The Henderson or Harrison kid.
Harrison Bunt.
Yeah.
Hunt, yeah.
And then they've got interest in Simon Barrow from Michigan State, who's already been to LSU and is going to Miami and Missouri. There's some reports out there that he is interested in potentially taking an official visit to Florida State. But I talked to someone last night I trust who doesn't think they're really in play with Barrow. And, of course, they're also interested in his teammate, Derek Harmon, who's a 6'5", 320-pound sophomore. He's going to Colorado this weekend and has scheduled visits to Miami and Oregon. I do know that FSU has interest in him. And then, of course, there's another defensive end that just jumped in the portal that Florida State had offered, Zion Grady. Is it Zion Grady, Fish, that the other kid that went to Michigan State? Zion's his first name. But
I thought Zion Grady was the
Zion
from Alabama.
Zion.
Yeah. Well, there's a Zion something from Michigan State.
Zion Young, is that it?
Zion Young, that's it. Yeah. I got Zion Grady on the brain because I saw him on Sunday.
There's 2 guys from Michigan State they're after, for sure.
Yeah.
So
interesting. Yeah, but anyway, so all right, so back to the spring game, Nick. Who were some of the other kids that showed up that you guys talked to, and update us on kind of where they are with Florida State?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a huge gathering of prospects, and I know a lot of programs like to make the spring game this big recruiting event because it's a good way for recruits to see the team in action, but that's not the way that Mike does it. Obviously, the spring showcase is a glorified spring practice, and I'm sure it doesn't attract the top talent, especially when you're having a lot of these top kids through practice throughout the rest of the spring anyway. So there were a couple of, I think probably the most important visits that you had were a couple of running backs. You had Byron Lewis out of American Heritage coming back on campus after he visited Ohio State a couple of times. I think that's a very important visit. You want to keep getting him on campus as much as possible. We all feel like Florida State is in a pretty good spot for him right now, so just keep getting him on campus and stay in that battle. And then Usman Kroma, who Florida State had been trying to get on campus for pretty much since the last time he was here, which was in October, I believe. They've been trying to get him on campus. That visit had kept getting delayed further and further. They finally got him on campus. So while they were losing some momentum in that recruitment, maybe they made back up some ground because he came here and said, I really miss this place. It seems like I really miss the coaching staff, and it seems like the feeling was mutual. So I think those 2 running backs, getting them on campus was really good. And then there was a lot of work done with 2026 and 2027 kids. They offered Aiden Pouncey, who I think is going to be another really, really good defensive back in the 2026 class. So, a lot of work was done with the 26s. A couple of key 2025 visits. Carday Smith, who committed to Auburn, was on campus. Unfortunately, he drove away in the magical golf cart of of whoever it was, and we didn't get a chance to talk to
If
him.
it had music going, it was Ratliff.
Yeah, I don't think there was music going on, but they drove him away in a golf cart, and obviously he committed to Auburn a couple weeks ago, so I think he had that. Pat, correct me if I'm wrong. I think he's had that visit set up for a while, so it wasn't like a decision.
Yeah,
after.
Yeah, he told me like 30 minutes after he committed to Auburn. He goes, I'm still coming back for this.
Yeah. So to answer your question, I'm yapping a little bit too much. Byron Lewis and Osman Chroma were probably the two most important visits as it pertains to the 2025 class that were there, and they both seem to have had pretty good visits.
Yeah, well, listen, I'm glad they got Chroma on board because that means they are starting to trend back in the right direction with him.
Mm-hmm.
Fish, I know you really like Chroma, and I know that you thought that they might be going back in that. So you're kind of like we're foreshadowing your stock up and stock down, because the last time we did an office, and when you had stock up with Chroma, I had stock down, and sure enough, he pops back on campus a week after you have him on stock up. How'd you know? What'd you know that I didn't know?
I probably just got lucky. Yeah, I'm a straight shooter. I just, they have, once the Alvin Henderson kid committed to Penn State, which was kind of a surprise. Everybody thought he was going to go to Auburn. They need two running backs in this class, and I think those were their top three. You don't want to be down to just Byron Lewis, because Lewis is going to be wanted by everybody in the country. I think the Chroma kid, while he's super talented and everything, I don't think you have as many schools going after him. So you're talking one or two schools you're competing against compared to Lewis, who you're going to compete against 10 schools or 15 schools to really get down to that final two. They've done a great job. After watching the spring game, I'm never going to really be concerned with Norvell and his ability to get a run game going. He's done a great job with every guy. But if he gets these type of players in there, you saw what happened with Benson. These are next level running backs. That run game could be special with one of those two guys.
Yeah. Listen, I think you're right. I think listen, I don't know who else would be kind of fourth on their board. I know Alvin was up there, obviously Osman and Byron were too. I know the Simeon kids, Sean Simon. I know he's been on campus a couple times, but but I agree with you. I trust Mike's evaluation of running backs at this point. And listen, the portal's an option if you don't get two out of the high school class, right? You've got a stacked backfield right now with Cam and Sam Singleton, and then you got Micah Danzy coming in, so you'll have three underclassmen on your roster next year. Toafili will be gone. Obviously, Roydell will be gone, so they're going to bring in, I think, two. But I think they'll be fine one way or the other. But, yeah, certainly, listen, I really like the Chroma kid. I really hope that they are in the thick of it with him. Nick, now I know a kid that you and Fish saw down in Miami was on campus, and you guys kind of have different takes on him, but you did get a chance to talk to 2026 defensive end / linebacker Jake Krull. What was kind of his message? And I know his rankings have been bumped up recently by rivals and others. But what are your thoughts on Jake?
Yeah, well, I think going into this weekend, I think if you're Jake, you would have hoped that you got an offer from Florida State. He didn't get that offer. I think my understanding is they want to see him in camp this summer, either coming back for summer camp on June 9th, 8th, that weekend, something like that, or they're going to visit him down at Bishop Moore in Orlando sometime while they're on the recruiting trail. But he was really impressed with the speed and the strength of Florida State's defensive ends. I know we kind of briefly touched on it earlier in the show about just how many prospects have been impressed with what Papuchis has done with the defensive ends. And look, it doesn't surprise me that he was impressed with the speed of the defensive end, because he is a very twitchy, very fast off the ball type prospects. He needs to build out more. He's kind of a tweener at this stage. So that's another part of his game that he's going to need to improve a little bit before I think Florida State is a little bit more inclined to give him an offer and get in the running and jump in the pool for him. But he seemed to enjoy, the defensive end work during the showcase, and you just got to hope that Florida State hops in the pool.
Yep. Well, Listen, as I was in Atlanta, I got some updates on Zion Grady, and I just want to get your thoughts on this, Fish. It seems like maybe it's a 4-team race now as opposed to a 6-team race. I heard a couple of times up there that it's down to FSU, Miami, Tennessee, and Auburn, that maybe Georgia and Alabama are looking at other options now at this point. And not, he's not as high on their board maybe as he is on these other 4 teams. What do you think? That obviously that helps Florida State's chances, right? If Alabama and Georgia are not up there,
you want to eliminate the Giants real quick. I mean, Auburn is Auburn. You know what they're going to do to get a player, but these are the difference makers we talked about. They've had them with Verse. You had it with Jermaine Johnson. It looks like MJJ is going to be in that same category. You want that difference maker at those positions that change games. Defensive ends with talent and speed change games. And I think that is what this kid Grady is. I think he's a special talent. And you know what? He fits what they look for. Big, long, athletic type kid, kind of twitchy, could get off the ball quick. He's going to beat guys with his athleticism. He could set the edge. He's strong enough not to get overrun in the run game. I think he has all the tools they're looking for. He's got to be up there at the top of the board or near the top of the board. So, I mean, if they're back in it and they've got a shot, I know the kid has taken at least 1 or 2 visits to Miami. So that's going to be another Miami-Florida State battle, but he's an important piece of the puzzle for their 2025 class.
Yeah, speaking of another important piece to the 2025 puzzle is Tavion Wallace. Tavion was had a good day at Rivals Elite Camp in Atlanta. Really, he's a guy that runs track. I think he's running 10,900 meters. He's got. I saw him make a really nice recovery in 101 pass pro, which is obvious. I mean, not pass pro, 101 pass. Where you're covering running backs, which you really had a disadvantage when you got to cover 10 yards between an entire field, but he made a really nice play. It looks like, again, another player that's down to 4 schools. He's going to visit Georgia on June 7th, Arkansas on May 31st, FSU on June 14th. Now, he didn't mention it. Now, it's been reported that he's visiting South Carolina as well, but Tavion did not mention it. But listen, that's, if he's down to 4 and those are his 4, how do you like Florida State's chances, Fish?
On Tavion?
Tavion, yep.
Yeah, I mean, I like the kid's film a lot. I turned it on again the other day to watch because I know you had seen him. I think they've got a shot. From what I've been told, he's at the top. Florida State's at the top of his list. Mm-hmm. So that linebacker room, man, we talk about it all the time. They need some difference makers. Tavion's one of them. I would really like him. There was like 1 or 2 kids. The state of Georgia has really good linebackers this year. And this is one of them. Duke's the other one. They need to land at least one of these guys to improve that room.
And listen, and Duke was unbelievable at the camp, by the way. And of course, he did visit Florida State last week or the week before the spring game. So they got him back on campus after the Bama commit. Now, he did work out with he's being recruited as a safety by Florida State, I guess, because he talks about Surtain. But he worked out as a linebacker. He did not take a snap at safety. He worked out with a linebacker. So obviously that shows you what Alabama is planning on doing with him, or at least Alabama and or his high school. But
I mean, the state of Georgia has like 3 or 4 like elite guys. I mean, Tavion's in the top 3 or 4. I mean, I wish they could get in on Zayden Walker. I don't know what the story is with him, but I mean, overall they got some. This kid's a really.
We haven't heard too much from Walker since he was here in January, where he said, I think Georgia, Florida State, and there was another school. It might have been Miami or Florida. It might have been Florida.
Watch his film. That's a different level.
I think he's going to Colorado, guys. If I'm remembering the right kid, because I did.
It was Georgia, Florida State, and somebody else. But either way,
I'm thinking of another kid. It's not Zayden.
Oh, you're thinking of Montrez Walker.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking.
Yeah. But nonetheless, I mean, Zayden, we haven't heard too much from him since he visited Florida. I think, look, if you're going to get one of the linebackers from Georgia right now, and it's not named Duke Johnson, I think Tavion's going to have to be that guy. Florida State's at the top of his list right now. you need to land on him, especially because it looks like some of the other prospects that you're in on outside of kind of your borders in Florida and Georgia. Pettijohn is going to be hard to get. It seems like he's leaning Texas right now. And obviously there's a lot of visits to go and a lot of officials to take, but it seems like if you're going to land one, I think Florida State's going to have to try and land Tavion.
Well, if you can get Tavion, you got Ethan Pritchard, you're pretty good, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you take a third? Maybe if he's good enough, right? We always say if he's good enough, you do it, and it depends on how and I think it also depends on how they feel about where Blake is going, where the rest of the young linebackers are going, Tamir, Hickman, Collins, all what kind of potential they see in there. And of course, again, we'll say this all the time in every position, they got the portal. Now I'm going to talk about a guy down your neck of the nape, Fish, and that is Nashawn Montgomery. I thought he looked really good in the camp that I was at. He was voted one of the top 3 receivers in Atlanta. Showed the ability to adjust and catch a wet football. It was against air, but it was an impressive catch. But listen, he does not have an official visit set up with Florida State yet, which kind of shocked me because he's been on campus multiple times for unofficial visits. The only 2 he has set up right now are Penn State and Florida State. Now, he did tell me they were supposed to talk to Dugans this week and try to set up an official visit with Florida State. Where is Florida State with Nashawn, Fish?
I think it's a wait and see kind of thing. I definitely think they need to expand the wide receiver board. Some of the guys they were on fallen off from the kid from Jacksonville, some of the other guys. I mean, the Wilson kid, who I like a lot, Dallas Wilson out of Tampa. I don't think he's been on campus enough. We talk about it. You got to get these kids on campus a ton of times. The Joshua Moore kid is kind of like Nashawn, bigger, stronger kid. So it'd be nice for them to add a couple more pieces to that board because they do need to expand that room, in my opinion.
Yeah, and one of the best defensive tackles at the camp was Malik Autry, who's committed to Auburn. He's a 2025 guy, 6'6", 320 now. He did tell me that he has been in constant contact with Odell, that Odell wants to get him down on campus. He has not visited. That's never a good sign, particularly when you're committed to another school. But he did say that he is entertaining the fact of coming on a mini visit this spring and would follow that up with an official visit during the season to see a game in person. Listen, it's a hard flip, but he's an outstanding player, outstanding-looking prospect. He's probably the most dominant defensive lineman at that camp. Listen, do you think Florida State's got any chance to make any headway with Malik?
On which kid again?
Malik Autry.
You guys would know a little bit more about that. Him from being an Alabama kid or I don't really know the kid that well.
Yeah, he's from Opelika. Anyway, you'd like him if you watch his film. But
no, I did watch his film. The kid.
I think it's going to be hard to flip him. Yeah. All right, so a kid I saw, Fish, that you really like and think Florida State needs to go all in on is 2025 quarterback Antoine Hill, who was on campus April 6th for an unofficial visit. I spoke with him. He understands. Mike has told him that they are committed to Tramel Jones, and he has not quite made up his mind yet whether they're going to take a second quarterback and go.
I would take him and forget what Tramel really wants. I'm not as high on Tramel as some others. I think quarterbacks have to have one elite trait. When you're recruiting them, I don't see that one elite trait with Tramel. I think he's one of those guys that's more of a developmental guy. Where Antoine, you saw him in person. Yes, there's some flaws to his game, but he's got a big time arm and he can run. He's a great athlete. He could probably play tight end if he didn't play quarterback. And he's a big physical kid. He looks like a grown man. I don't know what you guys thought about him when you saw him in person, but he's an impressive looking physical kid. He reminds me a lot of Anthony Richardson coming out of high school, a very raw but talented kid. Florida State, when you look at what Florida put on the field last week in their spring game, and I know it's a spring game and people say it doesn't matter, the Lagway kid's a big-time talent. Florida State, you want to keep up with the guys that you're going against. I think that kid's going to be a superstar. I think Antoine Hill, and we've seen what Luke can do his high school film, that these are two guys. You get Antoine Hill after you get a kid like Luke, you now have the potential to have an NFL type guy on your campus that you could develop. And it's going to allow you to win ball games and compete with your rivals. And I think it's a no-brainer. I think you take the kid, you put him in that quarterback room, and that quarterback room continues to get better.
Yeah, and I was really impressed with some of the things when I asked him a couple of questions on Sunday in Atlanta. I was really impressed with a couple of his answers. When we talked about it, he said the reason he came down with Peyton Joseph and Peyton was there, but Antoine was with his family, and they were not hanging out with Peyton. I'm sure they rode down together. Actually, they're both going to Memphis for visits, which is funny, especially after they got the FedEx money. We'll talk about that later. But really, he just said, really just trying to figure out things with Florida State, what they have got going on, seeing some things that they are doing with DJ, right? So he knows that he's more like DJ than the other quarterback on the roster from a size standpoint. Went to watch spring practice, and I think it looked good there. He basically said that he thinks that what they're going to do with DJ would be how they would use him if he came to Florida State. So so he did say, hopefully the next time I will be on campus for an official visit. I said, what about Mike and Tony impresses you? Just the quarterback development with Coach Norvell, what they did with Jordan Travis, what he did with his quarterbacks at Memphis. So he's gone back and studied Mike. He's paying attention to what's going on. And he goes, I think that's why DJ chose Mike, was to come here because of what Mike did with Jordan. And he says, getting to see what DJ does this year, I think it mimics what I do there if I go there. So he's paying attention to the right things. And I thought that was a very, for a rising senior, was a very insightful answer. And I mean, this was over a 2-minute conversation. I mean, he was able to, clarify his why he was interested in Florida State. And so it's just going to be interesting. Now, he did say that he said, but they just got to stay loyal to him, meaning Tramel Jones. Right now, if they decide to take 2 quarterbacks, then they will hit me up. He's going to visit Memphis, Duke, Ole Miss, and Florida, it looks like right now. And obviously try to looks like he's going to work with Florida State to see how that works out as they continue to move forward. We'll see what happens. Nick, you got anything you want to add on the quarterbacks? You want to see 2 quarterbacks in this class?
It's really developed into an interesting situation because I think if you go back even just before signing day, I think you could really make an argument for taking 2 quarterbacks. But then you grab Trevor Jackson, who's a walk-on. And, I'm not saying that you should not take Antoine Hill just because Florida State got a walk-on quarterback. But now there's just an extra person in that room. And Trevor Jackson could have played D1 ball on scholarship somewhere, whether that was Ole Miss or wherever the heck he ended up. But,
he could throw it.
He could throw it. And obviously he's gonna need to develop. And, I guess whatever happens with Brock and Luke, it's all the way down the road. Who knows? That's all I can really add. It's an interesting situation. I think I agree with Fish. You say you need an elite trait in a quarterback, but Tramel Jones has been committed for over a year now. It's a delicate situation. It's an interesting one. Definitely a good problem to have because, I remember when Florida State had no quarterbacks. So,
Yeah, that's funny because I remember one year and of course this is going in the way, way, way back machine. But I remember one year they signed Peter Tom Willis and Chip Ferguson in the same class. Casey Weldon and Brad Johnson were signed in the same class. So it's funny.
Listen, other teams do it. I know it seems rare in college football, but other teams, Georgia's stacked and LSU.
They just got a commitment from a high school kid. They're fixing to get Rashida.
Yeah,
I think they did. I think they already landed Rashada.
I think he is. I think he's announced his commitment. Hey, I tell you another guy y'all going to. I can't wait to go back and watch his film after watching him in camp. He's a 2026 kid that Florida State offered not too long ago. Caden Hall, 6'3", 195, big, long, can cover a ton of ground. Matched up really well with some really talented receivers. Fish, I'd like to come back and talk to you guys about him. I think he's a guy that might grow into a linebacker at just under 200 pounds right now. And he's a thicker kid for a DB, but I think I cannot wait to watch his film and watch him play this fall. I did catch up with Tyler Atkinson. He did not participate. If you guys are familiar with Florida State's 2026 recruiting, Tyler is probably the number 1 outside linebacker on their board. He's been on campus many times. But, listen, he says he's just going to kind of fill the summer out. He may be here. He may not. I think he will be on campus, probably unofficially. He just continue to talk about Coach Norvell and how much respect he has for him. So it'll be interesting to see how things transpire with Tyler, whose profile is only going to grow, but he is rated as the top outside linebacker in the nation by rivals. But
I watched Caden's film, and he was very impressive. I gave him a high grade. I feel like he's definitely going to be one of the top players in the state of Georgia, and not only that, probably one of the best players in the country. So.
Yeah. Well, listen, we've got plenty of notebook stuff on Atlanta. If you go to theosceola.com, I just printed out the last of my reports on Atlanta. It's got some information on Tavion, Nashawn, Antoine, Kyle Ellis, who was very impressive, a 2026 guy who Alex Atkins has told, even though he's committed to Auburn, we've got a spot for here at Florida State. He was very impressive. Caden Prothro, the 2026 tight end, man, he was unbelievable. He was in both Kel and Caden as rising juniors were the MVPs of their respective positions at this camp. And Kel Ellis worked out at center guard and tackle. He was on campus for an unofficial visit, as was Caden about 3 weeks ago. So we got notes on them. And then I got some names to watch that I saw at camp, including Zyke Helton, a 4-star center out of Carrollton, Georgia. He's a one-time Alabama decommitted after Nick Saban retired, and he was supposed to be at the spring showcase and decided he wanted to take his girlfriend to prom, so he canceled the trip. And then his quote was, I asked him, what has the message been from FSU offensive line coach Alex Atkins? His answer, when are you going to come to see me? And that started his quote. The next time he texts me, I will definitely be there. And then he said, sorry, I canceled, coach. So
the Protho kid, is he related to the kid that was at Alabama a long time ago? I think he shattered his leg on that fade route in the end zone.
I know who you're talking about, but I don't know if I'd have to do more research on that. Yeah. And then we got some other guys, 2-foot linebackers. I think Florida State will end up getting involved with Anthony Davis, 2026 kid, and Chad Fairchild, both had impressive days. So we'll see, but there's plenty of notes, quotes, everything that you need. Go to theosceola.com, an Atlanta notebook. Nick has got his recruiting reports from spring showcase that are there. But all right, so guys, we got one last thing to talk about. We have not talked about it much at all between the three of us, but spring football is over. They finished on Monday with a little, I guess, did you go to practice on Monday, Nick?
It was closed. It was a closed practice.
Right. So probably a big corrections day on Monday as they close out the 2024 spring football practice period, and now they are on the road recruiting, which means it's never going to slow down. Maybe slow down this weekend a little bit. There's no recruits, portal or otherwise, that are supposed to be in town as of the taping of this show at 11:53 a.m. in beautiful spring-like Tallahassee. All right, so guys, let's go spring game. Fish, you watched it. What are your key takeaways on the Seminoles after spring practice 2024?
My key takeaway is I think they're going to be a good team. I don't know if they're going to be the same team they were last year. I think they're a 9-10 win team, and then from there you need a little luck. I mean, you got to stay healthy. I think they're going to be very good running the football. I think DJ is going to be able to create the deep play, the exciting play, the 2-3 play drives. But he's also going to have some inconsistency throwing the football. So they're going to have some 3-and-outs, some back-to-back-to-back type drives where the offense bogs down a little bit. I think the offense will get better with DJ as the season goes along and they find out really what his strengths are, because I think that what Norvell does a great job at play calling is he really plays to players' strengths. He's not going to make DJ do stuff that he's not comfortable doing. I think once he figures that out, but I do think you could see some struggles early on. I think the fan base needs to be patient with DJ because he's not Jordan. He does have more physical talent. He's a bigger kid, 6'4", 240 pounds. He can run. That's one of the things that's hard to take away from the spring game is they're not really allowed to run. So you're taking away DJ's major strength. I think some of those design runs that they're going to be able to run with him and some of the running backs, you add in the little scat back that they brought in.
Jalen Lucas.
Yeah, so I think that they're going to be able to do a lot of exciting stuff. I do think that the offensive line, they still need to figure out that tackle spot. Jeremiah did struggle. I know some people say he didn't struggle. He did. Listen, it is what it is. He's not really a natural tackle. He's probably somebody that want to kick inside. But this is a problem they've had is they've been playing guards at tackle. And until they find, Lucas Simmons or one of those guys develops that's a bigger, longer athletic guy and can keep those defensive ends at bay, this is what you're going to have. But I think overall they're in a good spot for this season. I think they could have a pretty good team, compete for the ACC, and see what happens from there. But it's a team that I think you got to be patient with. This is not the same experienced team that they ran into the season last year. They're going to have some hiccups. So as a fan base, you got to be a little patient with what you're going to see on the field.
Yeah, they're definitely listening. When you lose one of the most dynamic playmakers in the country, in Jordan Travis, your team's going to be different. He's been leading this program for 3 years, and you lose Trey, Keon, Johnny, Jaheim, Braden, Jared, Renardo. I mean, we go on and on. The portal does give you a chance to close the gap quicker now that you have free agents. You don't have to wait for a high school kid to develop. But it's just like I was talking with a former Florida State player the other day who's played 10 years in the NFL, was all conference performer here. And he goes, listen, the thing that most people don't realize is, this would have been true, and this is not a knock on DJ, because it would have been true if most any quarterback started, including Brock Glenn and Luke Kromenhawk or anybody else that they could have brought in. But you're almost given, without Jordan Travis, you're almost giving defenders to the opposing defense a defender back, right? Because you're going to have to account for DJ somewhat, but he's not going to necessarily have the ability to flip the field with a run, right? I mean, he's going to be a 5 or 6 or 10-yard gain type of guy, whereas it didn't matter whether Jordan was throwing the ball or it was a run play. A zone read, you had to account for him. In the past game, you had to spy for him, so it is going to be a little bit different. Jordan was a unique player, and you just don't replace those type of people. Now, the more DJ went on, I did like, listen, he's hard not to like as a kid, as a person. Like he carries himself well. He obviously is a mentor to the younger quarterbacks. You could tell by the way they interacted with him that he's come on and taken on a leadership role. I remember there was a video of DJ throwing a touchdown pass in practice, and the most excited kid on the field that day was Brock Glenn. And Brock was the guy that had the biggest reaction to the play based on the film that I saw. And so I think that indicates that DJ has gone in there, assimilated with his not only the quarterback room, but I do think he is a different player. He's a 58% career passer. I think if Mike can get that straightened out a little bit, if they can get him 7 to 10% better, I think the Florida State can have an ACC caliber, a championship caliber season. But I think it is going to be a little bit different team. I think Grady Kelly is not Braden Fisk. I think Grady's going to be a good piece of the puzzle, but he's not going to be a guy that's going to dominate like Braden was. Now, I had my expectations were conservative on Marvin Jones Jr. He has certainly exceeded those expectations. I told myself the same thing I told myself about going from Jermaine Johnson to Jared Verse. I was like, all right, well, Marvin's not going to be Jared Verse. Well, I think, and listen, I don't know if it means anything. I know Mike said something about he's one of the few players that got over 20-something miles an hour on their. But anyway, he's more explosive than I thought he would be. I think he's got a chance to be a dominant player. And then you got Sione behind him. I still think linebacker's a question mark. I think the secondary can be very good. I think better with Greedy, but I've already talked about that. But I think the linebackers will be fine at some point. But you're going to have to with Blake and then is it Murphy, the kid from Alabama. I wasn't just blown away by him. I think that they brought him in as a will guy to compete against Blake, but I think he's more of an inside guy in that DJ Lundy, Omar Graham, Justin Cryer mold. But just because of where they are, the numbers point, I think they're going to have to play him at Will with Blake, and now I've noticed some people that put out depth charts that think they're even. I don't. I think Blake's the better player. I don't know why we're oring people that if you're not Mike Norvell, you don't. I mean, if you're going to do a depth chart,
yeah. I mean, Blake showed in the spring game just more natural instincts, showing the ability to make plays behind the line of scrimmage. I thought Sean, I mean, he had a rough day. I just didn't think he looked instinctive. He almost looked too big for the modern day college football. Everybody wants to be bigger, like SEC bigger. That kid, he's great if you play in a phone booth, but if for those people that used to go in a phone booth, but it's
Nick. Do you know what a phone booth is?
I've been in a phone booth.
All right. Good. But it's when you go back and you look at him, he just looks a little stiff, and that he's going to struggle in space. I think it behoove him to go and maybe trim down a little this summer, maybe try to get a little more athletic by trimming down. Marvin, listen, we heard stories, you and I, that he wasn't doing that well at Georgia. And so I remember what he was in high school. The one play he made in the spring game where he kind of dropped, I guess it was like a zone blitz, or he dropped back into coverage. He almost picked the ball off. I'm like, all right, that's why I thought so highly of Marvin in high school, is he made plays like that where he flashed that maybe he didn't dominate in the game, but there's that one or two plays where you're like, wow, this kid's different. That's an NFL different level play that you're like, if this kid gets it, he's going to be the next one in line that's going to walk across that stage and picking the commissioner up in the first round of the draft. It's exciting to see what Marvin can do.
Yeah, listen, I definitely think that he probably did not take into consideration the defensive system he was going to. They're more odd based at Georgia. Obviously, Adam is more an even based guy, so he's going to be a hand in the ground defensive end as opposed to a stand up outside linebacker, which is what kind of Georgia had him doing, at least in the game against Alabama in the SEC championship game. You saw him out in coverage, and that's, I don't know. I mean, there's a reason Kirby did it. And I'm not gonna sit here and criticize what Kirby Smart has done schematically.
But not everybody's the right fit for every scheme. Sometimes some guys are 4-3, some guys are 3-4. Yep. It's all about fit. You see it in the NFL, you see it at the college level, you see it at any level. It's just something that he wasn't comfortable in their scheme, and you can't knock Kirby because the success he's had, but he does seem like a better fit at Florida State.
Yeah, he does. So I'm gonna have to go back and watch the spring game again because there's a couple guys I did not get the eval like I wanted to. I want to go back and see how my man Andre Otto did. I've had
he did well. He had one play where he came across on a pull play and he kind of sealed his defender. Otto's going to be a real good player. I mean, we talked about him and what a great kid.
Yeah, he is a great kid. Great kid. And of course, I think TJ Ferguson, you talked about guards and Jeremiah Byers, where if he moves inside, I'm not sure he's beating out TJ Ferguson. Maybe he can beat out one of the other kids. I don't know. I'm trying to remember. You got the kid from Leonard and Keandre, I guess, battling for the other guard spot, and maybe Bryson Estes puts himself in that battle. But anyways, I think Florida State's offensive line got better this spring. I think and listen, and we know Mike and Alex have been able to be successful with this offense with some subpar offensive line. So I think that the fact that this could be their best offensive line with guys that like Jalen Lucas behind them, Roydell Williams, Cam Davis, Lawrence Toafili, and then listen, we'll find out about the receivers, right? Still a talented group, but mostly unproven. So I think we'll see how those guys do once we get to the fall. But certainly, I agree with you, Fish. I would not sit here and say this team's going to be as good as last year's by any stretch. But I do think they have a chance to be a good team. I would, if you had to ask me now, I would say one of the top three teams in the ACC going into the season. Based on expectation. And listen, there's a lot that has to be done. This is not like the old days where your roster was going to be the same with the exception of 20 seniors moving out and 20 freshmen moving in, the portal has changed things, right? So you really got to go back and study who these other programs on your schedule have brought into their roster to get a good idea of exactly what everybody's returning or adding to their roster. Because what's the old thing in the playoffs where the NFL, when free agency hit, if you go back and look at what free agency's done to the NFL, just about every year, there's 4 new teams on each division that don't make the playoffs, or new teams that do make the playoffs from the year before. So I think we're going to start seeing maybe some things like that happen in college football, where there's going to be a surprise team in every.
I really believe college football is to the point where you're going to have a team one year win 12, 11 games, and then the next year win 5, 6, 7, just because of the turnover. You're just going to have – they're not going to be able to recover because their roster – if they're a team that has 30, 40 seniors and they just can't replace them and they've lost their depth, it could be a perfect storm. You could have a program that really struggles.
Hey, you know who surprises me? Every maybe I wasn't paying attention. I think I was, but every time I turn around, Missouri is getting a commitment from somebody that's unbelievable. I mean, we always talked about there's going to be surprise programs once NIL comes into existence. Missouri is one of those. I mean, I know this probably.
I think the guy's done what he did last year. They're coaching, and they've got probably the best wide receiver room in the country this year heading into the season. Drinkwitz has done a very good job, and they're a program that has to hit the portal. One, Missouri just doesn't produce enough talent, and all the states they go to, they have to go find kids that are kind of under the radar, and you want to talk about developing. That's a program that has to develop kids.
Yeah. Well, listen, this is going to be about the first weekend we've had off, or as long as Florida State's schedule stays the way it is right now. We don't get a surprise text that says so and so is in town. I don't know what I want to do with myself. This is the first weekend off since, with the exception of Easter weekend, since mid-January. So it's been quite a run.
Dude, so leave your poor dog alone, all right?
What's that?
I said leave your poor dog alone, all right?
Hey, the dog's, she's outside enjoying the lovely spring weather, and we're going to go for a couple of walks. And so it's going to be a fantastically boring weekend watching the draft. I love it. But all right, guys, I appreciate you joining us. Listen, if you don't subscribe to the Osceola, please go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com and check us out. We got a lot of free recruiting content. We got a lot of recruiting content behind the paywall, but go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com and check us out. If you're listening to our show or watching our show on YouTube, please subscribe and hit the notification button on our YouTube channel so that you get alerts every time that we do things like this. And then again, we want to thank our sponsor, Aer Lingus. If you're planning to go or wanting to go to watch Seminoles open up against the Yellow Jackets on August 24th in Dublin, go to Seminoles2Ireland.com. Seminoles, the number 2, Ireland.com, and you'll get ticket and flight packages. It takes you right to the FSU website. And we want to thank Aer Lingus for sponsoring the show, as well as Alumni Hall, as Fish has got the great graphic behind him. But hey, Nick, you did pretty good, man. I was concerned that you would ruin our feng shui or whatever you call it, mojo that Fish and I have. There were no arguments today. That was good, Fish. We did well. We didn't argue about anybody. So we'd use that most off the tape. But anyway, hope everybody has a great weekend. Fish, Nick, appreciate everybody's efforts and getting everyone educated on what's going on with Florida State recruiting. And we will be back next week, and we will have a special guest with a new sponsor and former Seminole. He will be with us and talk about what he's been doing over the last 25 years and get caught up on his playing career and what he's doing now and why he chose to become a sponsor. All right, guys, y'all have a great weekend.
Your Seminoles kick off the 2024 football season in Dublin, Ireland, as they face the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets in the Aer Lingus College Football Classic. Join fellow Florida State fans on a trip you won't soon forget. Game tickets for the August 24th matchup are now available through Florida State Athletics Ticket Office and selling fast. Visit Seminoles2Ireland.com. That's Seminoles, the number 2, Ireland.com. And go Noles!